Thomas Jefferson, Road to Independence. A summary view of the rights of British America is written by Thomas Jefferson in 1774. The work was presented to and debated by the First Continental Congress. When this took place, Jefferson did not attend. Despite his attempts, Congress agreed to a more moderate decision than Jefferson's proposed concept. Despite not being able to completely convince Congress, friends of Jefferson printed the summary in pamphlet form. It was distributed throughout London, New York, and Philadelphia. Research states that the document helped establish Jefferson's reputation as a skillful, if radical, political writer.
He wrote this before he wrote the Declaration of Independence, in which he laid out for the delegates of the First Continental Congress a set of grievances against King George III.
Jefferson declares that the British Parliament did not have the right to govern the 13 colonies. He argues that since the individual colonies were founded, they were independent of British rule. Jefferson, in this work, held that a lineal title, not feudal title, was held to American lands, and thus the people did not owe fees and rents for that land to British Crown. George Washington arrives at the Second Continental Congress in 1775 and decides to send troops to Boston. The Second Continental Congress was a convention of delegates from the 13 colonies that started meeting in the spring of 1775 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It succeeded the First Continental Congress, which met between September 5, 1774 and October 26, 1774, also in Philadelphia. The Second Congress managed the colonial war effort and moved incrementally towards independence, adopting the United States Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776. By raising armies, directing strategy, appointing diplomats, and making formal treaties such as the Olive Branch Petition, the Congress acted as the de facto national government of what became the United States. The Second Continental Congress decides to form a navy, but must find the money to form it. They then close all seaports for British ships. Congress then starts their Continental Army, raised by Congress in the states, to oppose British forces. The Continental Navy was the Navy of the United States during the American Revolutionary War and was formed in 1775. The main goal of the Navy was to intercept shipments of British material and generally disrupt British maritime commercial operations. The initial fleet consisted of converted merchantmen because of the lack of funding, manpower, and resources, with exclusively designed warships being built later in the conflict. The vessels that successfully made it to sea met with success only rarely, and the effort contributed little to the overall outcome of the war. The fleet did serve to highlight a few examples of continental resolve, notably launching Captain John Barry into the limelight. It provided needed experience for a generation of officers who went on to command conflicts which involved the early American Navy.
Meanwhile, the British planned to destroy the Americans by gathering 20,000 troops and seizing U.S. ships.
The British Army during the American Revolutionary War served for 8 years in campaigns fought around the globe. Defeat at the Siege of Yorktown to a combined Franco-U.S. force ultimately led to the loss of the 13 colonies in eastern North America, and the concluding of the Treaty of Paris deprived Britain of many of the gains achieved in the 7 Years' War. However, several victories elsewhere meant that much of the British Empire remained intact.
The impressment of sailors from American ships caused serious tensions between Britain and the United States in the years leading up to the War of 1812.
The large size of the British Royal Navy in the Age of Sail meant impressment was most commonly associated with Britain. It was used by the Royal Navy in wartime, beginning in 1664 and during the 18th and early 19th centuries. is a means of crewing warships, although legal sanction for their practice goes back to the time of Edward I of England. The Royal Navy impressed many merchant sailors as well as some sailors from other nations. People liable to impressment were eligible men of seafaring habits between the ages of 18 and 55 years. Non-sailors were impressed as well, though rarely. Common Sense is a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine in 1776, advocating independence from Great Britain to people in the 13 colonies. It was published anonymously on January 10, 1776, at the beginning of the American Revolution, and became an immediate sensation. It was sold and distributed widely and read aloud at taverns and meeting places. In proportion to the population of the colonies at that time, 2.5 million, it had the largest sale and circulation of any book published in American history. The Declaration of Independence is the statement adopted by the Second Continental Congress, meeting at the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia on July 4, 1776, which announced that the 13 American colonies, then at war with the Kingdom of Great Britain, regarded themselves as 13 newly independent sovereign states and no longer under British rule. Instead, they formed a new nation, the United States of America. A committee of 5 had already drafted the formal declaration to be ready when Congress voted on independence. The term Declaration of Independence is not used in the document itself. John Adams persuaded the committee to select Thomas Jefferson to compose the original draft of the document, which Congress would edit to produce the final version. The Declaration was ultimately a formal explanation of why Congress had voted on July 2nd to declare independence from Great Britain, more than a year later after the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War.